to 67 News. Today we're talking about something that plays a big role in our everyday lives. Even though we don't really think about it, friction. Friction is the force that tries to stop objects from moving. It's the reason your shoes don't slide on the floor, why your car can stop safely, and even why you can hold the pencil without it slipping out of your hand. In all of our physics labs this semester, friction has been one of the main reasons our experiments didn't match the perfect theoretical numbers. Because friction depends on two surfaces touching each other. It changes more than we expect. In this lab, our goal was to actually measure friction and understand it better. We focused on two types, static friction and kinetic friction. Static friction is the force that keeps an object from moving in the first place. That's why you have to push harder at the beginning to get something to start sliding. Once the object is already moving, kinetic friction takes over, and that force is usually smaller, but you don't have to push as hard to keep moving as you did to start. So to study this, we designed an experiment where we pushed and pulled an object on a flat surface and also on an inclined plane. We measured the force it took to get the object to start moving and the force that needed to keep it moving at a constant speed. We also looked at how the angle of a ramp changes the friction. By using sensors and tools in the lab, we would collect real data and use formulas to calculate the coefficients of both static and kinetic friction. We repeated our lab tests several times to make sure our numbers were accurate. Doing multiple trials helps reduce human error and gives us a more reliable result. In the end, we were able to compare how an object behaved in different conditions and how friction changed depending on the situation. This experiment helped us understand why friction is so important in physics and in real life. Now that you know what our experiment was all about and why we did it, let's take a look at what tools made it possible. I'm going to pass it over to my lab partner, who will walk you through the materials and equipment we used during this lab. This is 67 News. Stay with us.
Good afternoon, and welcome to today's physics lab update. In this segment, we're taking a closer look at one of the most important forces in motion, friction. Our team spent the day working with a set of sensors, an inclined plane, and sliding blocks to explore how friction acts on objects in different situations. The experiment focused on two main types of friction: static friction, which keeps an object from moving, and kinetic friction, which acts once the object is already sliding. Using the materials provided in the lab, our goal was to accurately measure both friction coefficients through multiple methods. Our setup included a flat track, an adjustable incline ramp, a force sensor, a motion sensor, and a wooden block that served as a test subject. The force sensor let us measure exactly how much pulling force was required to get the block to start moving, which allowed us to calculate the coefficient of the static friction on a flat surface. Once the block was in motion, the motion sensor recorded its velocity and acceleration. The information helped us determine the kinetic friction while the object was sliding. The graphs produced by the motion sensor allowed us to clearly see the changes in motion and identify the portions of constant velocity and constant acceleration. We also used the incline method. By slowly raising the ramp, we watched for the exact angle where the block first began to slide. That critical angle was used to calculate static friction, again using a simple tangent relationship. Then as the block slid down the incline, the motion sensor recorded its acceleration, and we plugged that into our equation to solve for the kinetic friction of a slope. Across all three trials, these materials helped us compare different ways of measuring friction: flat surface pulls, incline angles, and acceleration-based calculations using the sensors gave us a clean and reliable data that made it easy to compute averages for both static and kinetic friction. In the end, this experiment showed how powerful basic tools like force sensors, motion sensors, and adjustable ramps can be in analyzing real-world physics. By combining these materials, we were able to see the differences between static and kinetic friction and how surface angle and motion affect each one.
Good evening. I am your host, Fernanda Torres, here to tell you about our Lab 9 procedure. This week, we worked with friction and its coefficients. Our goal was to find both the kinetic and static friction coefficients between two objects. We worked with a frictionless glider, a cube that created that friction, and one of the cars from before. Our first test run was a continuous force pushing the car towards the end of the glider, flat on the table. Now our second trial was at an elevated angle, and our third and final trial, we lifted the glider from one side till it started to move and gain that acceleration. Now, here's us in action. Here's us doing the first, second, and third trial all in order. As you can see, we saw some interesting motion on the graphs as the cars began to move. We also saw the points where the force was exerting the most. We then began our calculations with the given formulas to find our kinetic and static coefficients. We organized our data in each table. Now, I'll pass it over to my teammate that will explain those specific calculations and show the table. Thank you for tuning in on all our labs this past semester. It was a pleasure being here, and I hope you enjoyed our last lab. Good night, and I hope to see you again soon.
Good evening, everyone. I hope everyone's staying inside, staying warm. Just finished up with that Lakers game. LeBron is back. But I'm your co-host, again, for Nightly 67 News, Mateo Barasa. And tonight we're going to be discussing another experiment from the students here at the local university, here at UTEP, where the students went over topics such as static and kinetic friction, which is something that has been present in all of our past evening segments when we analyze the data. This pesky little topic is what leads to a lot of the inaccuracies or percent difference, things like that. It's friction. A lot of that is friction. So static friction is classified as when the object doesn't move or the objects don't move. And kinetic friction is classified as when one object, at least one object, is moving or in motion. And what this gives us, some of the data we ran. We have a couple of tables right here. So in our first lab 9, and all of the labs going up to that, we observed the effects of friction, but didn't quite, well, to be quite frank, we didn't take any real analytics on those. So this is our first instance of that. And this tells a story of how static friction is usually less than, how kinetic friction is usually less than the static friction. We see here our force, the mass, and how that affects our friction. So in this instance, we can see this value is going to be a little bigger than this value right here, and that is just off of static and kinetic. And we could see those results reiterated on right over here in this bottom portion. We see mu k is equal to this value over the mass times gravity and then times the length. And again, we see how these various values affect our end result right here illustrated in this table. And we even get a diagram of these processes happening and how this correlates with the table. And we even have the calculations for our angle right here, which is 10 degrees. And we have the length, 73.5 centimeters. And our object is right here. So for this diagram, what we did is we made our plane the x-axis. That's why it looks a little tilted, but there's a perfect explanation for that. It's much more easy to process like this rather than if our axis was on a different plane. All right, so those are our numbers and that's our data for this lab. Thank you so much. Have a good night. And I'll give it to my co-host, Oliver Mesquita.
Good evening. I'm your host, Oliver Mesquita, and welcome to the final broadcast of Late Night 67 News. Tonight, Team 67 closes out our physics lab journey by investigating one of the most persistent forces in all of physics and anything, friction. So our mission for this lab was to use a specific setup using Capstone software, Capstone carts, and an incline or ramp to measure or to determine the coefficients of static friction and kinetic friction when
pushed or letting it fall down naturally on an incline. We first started with a flat surface trial, measuring the force required to keep the object from moving, and then the force required to keep it moving at a constant velocity. These trials went pretty smoothly. Our 3 attempts for each coefficient of friction averaged consistently. The static friction came out higher than the kinetic friction, which lined up good with the theory. Then we moved to the incline experiments, where the coefficient was calculated using tangent theta and also some algebra from the formula for calculating friction force. This ended up being the toughest part of the lab, where we found that even tiny shifts in the angle, the ramp, how evenly the object rested on it, even the speed at which the ramp was raised to an incline, really makes noticeable differences in your results. Compared to the flat surface setup, our incline measurements were a lot less consistent. Not because the physics was wrong necessarily, but just because the real world doesn't behave perfectly, as numbers do. It's just a good reminder that friction depends on a lot more than just the numbers. Surface texture, angle precision, the speed at which you raise it up, a lot of things, even the way you release the object makes a big difference. So our last lab highlighted why repeating trials matter, why experimental design takes a lot of teamwork, and why real world results never match theory exactly, or rarely do. And that's okay. After 9 labs, we've seen again and again and again and again that physics is not just calculations, but measurement, accuracy, troubleshooting, collaboration, and most of all, it's about learning from your mistakes. And with that, we officially wrap up Team 6-7's lab series. I'm Oliver Mesquita, signing off for one last time for Late Night 6-7 News. Thanks for tuning in every week. It's been a pleasure reporting the science. Until next time.